All right, let me catch you up on what's happened so far.
Just last week in Chicago, a 13-year-old boy riding his bike was brutally attacked and almost beaten to death, apparently for no other reason but the color of his skin.
Across the country, everybody was talking about what happened to Leonard, and it was already getting into some kumbaya territory.
The fact is, Leonard Clark is your brother. So Leonard Clark is my brother.
Seemed a little premature to me. I started investigating what really went down for the South Street Journal.
Tell me about when you heard, the day you heard about Leonard Clark getting attacked.
And while I was writing up my article, the attackers were lawyering up.
I represent Frank Caruso.
Okay.
He is not guilty. He didn't do this. It's a tragedy, and whoever did do it, I hope he's caught.
By the time I started reporting on the Leonard Clark case, I had just suffered a major loss with my weed business. One of my partners, who I'd known since like the 6th grade, he was making runs back and forth to California, and he got caught up on the road coming through Texas. He got popped, lost the whole load. So I needed a new phone because I was going to start my business over. I remember going to the T-Mobile, whatever it was, and they asked me what number I wanted. I could pick my own number out. And I'm looking at the phone to see what spelled weed. And I'm like, y'all got 9333? So my number was weed. 9333. WEED. That number blew the fuck up. 9333. People talk about it to this day. It was an urban legend. I was getting phone calls from folks I didn't know. You know your number spells weed? Who had just heard about the number, wanted to see if it was real. What's your name? You got weed? And I had a crucial connect who was getting his weed from Humboldt County out in California. So it was like the perfect product plus the perfect packaging. And so shit took right off. Shit took off again in no time. We ready?
Yeah.
So moving from weed to harder stuff, it wasn't just like that cut and dry. Actually, I remember having a white kid that I was buying a lot of weed from, and he had a heroin habit, and so he started asking me if I could find heroin. I didn't really look at it as getting into the heroin business. It was just, and it was like just nice extra money.
That was the first time?
That was probably the first time I sold heroin. It was like 97 or 98. Yeah, like right on the heels of all of this, probably. I'm Yohance Lacour. 25 years ago in Chicago, a little boy was beaten into a coma just for being black. Almost overnight, the news stories turned to racial reconciliation and forgiveness. This is a podcast about how that happened and how it changed my life. This is You Didn't See Nothing. Frankie Caruso beat Leonard Clark into a coma. Still, he was released on bond just a few days after the beating, and his parents began an apology tour.
Live from Chicago, this is Fox News at 9.
But the thing was, it wasn't really an apology tour because absolutely no one was saying sorry.
He's respectful. He's kind. What they're saying about him, that's not Frank.
That's Sherry Caruso, Frankie's mom, on Fox News. Clearly her son wasn't great on TV. Remember, Frankie says, "Get that camera out of my face before I break your head, goof."
Camera out of my face before I break your head, goof.
So Frankie's mom and dad were gonna have to speak for him.
You're viewing
a frightened and confused young man who overreacted out of fear, a situation that he has no idea, what am I doing here?
Have your kids been raised not to use the N-word? What type of racial attitude's been generated in the household?
We raise our children to believe that everyone is an equal.
Now remember, there were two other guys charged with Frankie, and they were claiming innocence too.
I had nothing to do with what went on.
My son is a good boy, and to this minute, I still don't believe it.
And back on Fox, Frank and Sherry are holding hands, saying their son had nothing to do with it.
Our message is that we are in deep prayer, much concern. We hope and pray that this boy has a speedy and full recovery.
Now, I can't help but wonder, were they praying for Lenard's speedy recovery because his life mattered, or so that their son wouldn't be charged with murder? The Carusos were on defense in this TV interview, but they was about to start playing some offense, and they recruited some powerful black folks to help them. Classic.
You know, those people standing, we need you all to come up and finish. You know, there's plenty of good seats.
So my producer, Bill, dude is a sleuth, right? A while back, he went into this basement archive of a college library, had to dig through hundreds of boxes of old-ass tapes that ain't nobody ever seen, until he found one, labeled April 4th, 1997, exactly 2 weeks after the attack. It's a church service, organized in response to the attack on Lenard and his buddy Cleve. It's in Progressive Community Church on the south side of Chicago, 48th and Wabash, like a block from the projects. It's a black church, but on this night, there's a whole lot of white people who've been bussed in on yellow school buses from across the expressway, Bridgeport.
So if you got to get together, you got to squeeze together a little bit so we can accommodate the people that's in the back. So if y'all come on up, just don't stand there. We want everybody.
There's a bunch of big wigs in the front row, judges and politicians. Even the governor of Illinois is there with his wife. And then the pastor takes the mic, Reverend B. Herbert Martin, wearing a white robe.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Oh, you can do better than that. This is a good evening. This is a fantastic evening.
Off to the side is Cleve, Lenard's friend who got away.
Cleveland was also with Lenard, and he's here tonight.
He's sitting with his mom, just a kid in a baggy t-shirt, looking like he'd much rather be anywhere else.
Because he also suffered tremendous trauma.
Reverend Martin pulls out a letter that Cleve wrote.
Cleveland, would you mind if I read the last part of this paragraph? I pray that God wake Lenard up. We never finish our bike ride. Never again will I see the world through the eyes of a child.
But the wild part is when he calls Frankie's parents to the podium.
The Carusos are here. So I'm going to ask if Mr. and Mrs. Caruso, if they would come this time to pray.
Sherry and Frank, fresh off of their TV interview, the whole church bursts into applause. Stands an ovation. The Carusos shake hands with the VIPs and the bigwigs on their way to the pulpit. Frank Sr. has on his red sweater vest, looking like a professor or something.
The Caruso family would like to offer a prayer for Leonard Clark's speedy recovery. Our Father, who art in heaven.
Frankie's mom is at the mic in a black jacket with a leather collar. Her hair looks like a 90s TV newscaster.
I just want to say that I came here hurting, but I'm leaving here healed.
I came here hurting, but I'm leaving here healing, she says. The church applauds like crazy.
In closing, I ask the Lord to enlighten us to bear in mind that children of all ages, color, and creed have one thing in common. They close their ears to advice and open their eyes to example. Thank you.
Praise God. Isn't that what worship is all about?
In the basement archive, we also found a clipping from this Italian-American newspaper, Fra Noi. And the article said the church was transformed into a temple of healing and reconciliation. They said it was a historic moment. And it wasn't just that one church service with the Carusos either.
This was the fourth religious service aimed at solving some of the problems created by the beating of Leonard Clark.
As it heals the inside, so can it heal the outside.
They was having these services in the projects on the low end and in Bridgeport at the Caruso's home church.
Reverend B. Herbert Martin, who's been organizing the prayer services, says the prayers are being answered.
Oh, by all means, we're a long ways removed from where we were when we got started.
And the services got bigger.
Frank Caruso's son couldn't attend tonight because he's confined to his home until his trial. But his father says he'll fill him in on what he missed.
I'm going to tell him I'm sorry that he couldn't be here this evening because it's an education for all our youth.
Frankie was on home confinement, minus doctor's visits and his shifts at the family cigar shop. And yet still, while he was awaiting trial, he managed to get arrested. Again. This time for threatening a restaurant owner who asked him to move his car from her lot. She told police that Frankie yelled, "Fuck you, motherfucker, I'll burn you." His lawyer and his dad called it a case of mistaken identity.
I remember thinking that the Caruso family, they were really trying to work people and really trying to, make it seem like they're not racist.
Lorraine Forte covered the Leonard Clark story for the Chicago Sun-Times. And in terms of day-to-day reporting, she probably did more than anybody else out there.
They wanted to have a reconciliation, whatever. And, obviously it's to try and help your son, but why is your kid out beating up people but yet now you're all about racial healing?
The Carusos were trying to keep their son out of prison. I get it. But Lorraine had the same question I did. Why is this black minister helping facilitate this? The thing about Reverend B. Herbert Martin is this. He's not just any pastor. His name means something because he was minister to Chicago's first black mayor. This was in the early 80s. And when I was a kid, Harold Washington was a big deal. 150 years of white mayors. And then, boom, Harold.
I'm here to tell you tonight, the state of the city is real good.
Harold didn't feel like a politician. He felt like family. Big smile, big mustache, very much a black man. And black churches helped get him elected. On the campaign trail, he'd go to 4 churches a night. And the pastor of his home church was B. Herbert Martin. Reverend Martin helped Harold get elected. And after he was elected, Harold gave him a job in his administration. Chairman of the CHA, overseeing Chicago's public housing. And in that role, Reverend Martin did some radical things. This is footage of Reverend Martin chaining himself to the entrance of a federal building to demand money to fix broken furnaces and frozen pipes.
All of the negotiations we've done, all the compromising we've done, all the signing of agreements we've done, and still the people are suffering and dying.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Back then, the Reverend was out here fighting for our people, especially folks in public housing. Every indication is that he was a stand-up dude, which is why it's wild that Martin was jumping on the Caruso bandwagon.
I don't know him. I don't know his motive. I don't know. But it just is just like, why are you doing this? Who are you to reconcile?
A sellout, That's what black folks were calling Martin, according to the Chicago Tribune, for extending the olive branch to Frank Caruso. But the article said Reverend Martin denied being paid. In the South Street Journal, we published some interviews about how kids in Lenard's building were feeling. They were saying that they wished that what happened to Lenard would have happened to them, so that they could get a basketball from Michael Jordan, and they could get a bike from Mary J. Blige, and they could maybe get moved out of the projects. For children to be that desperate, think about that for a second. You want to get up out of here so badly, you'll trade places with a kid in a coma.
Niggas been getting beat at Bridgeport all my life over there, so what's the big deal?
Hot Rod and I met when we were locked up together in Minnesota. Turns out he was from the same projects Lenard was from.
Grew up in Stateway Gardens, been over in the same area for like 48 years.
Hot Rod is a real intelligent, insightful dude, like a hood scholar.
The Lenard Clark thing, it wasn't a big issue because it happened so many times. This time it just got publicity.
He says that in the projects, you begin to normalize things that are not normal.
Some people had it was of the mindset, well, you shouldn't have been over there. Because in their mind, they had accepted as normal if you go over there, you're going to get ass beat. And that come from years and years of it being done and nothing happening, and we normalizing it. The dehumanizing becomes normal. And I was conditioned like that from the projects through the penitentiaries, and I believe that I was inferior. That's just how it is.
Most people remember Old Dirty Bastard as the stage-crashing secret weapon of Wu-Tang Clan, a raw showman with a wild sense of humor who left a lot of people confused, especially after his death. But I want to tell you the full story of ODB, a man of many names, a god in hip-hop, and the ruler of his own destiny. I'm Khalik Allah. From USG Audio, Novel, and Talkhouse, it's ODB, A Son Unique. Available now wherever you get your podcast.
A sign of hope today for the 13-year-old Chicago boy badly beaten in an apparent racial hate crime last week.
The Caruso's prayers must have been answered, because a week after the beating, Lenard came out of his coma.
Leonard Clark has been in a coma for a week. The doctors say he is more responsive today.
But it still wasn't sweet.
This is how the world last saw Leonard Clark last week. A gasp for air, maybe a leg reflex. This is Leonard today. Eyes sometimes open, body movement, sounds coming from his battered body.
Doctors say Clark suffered severe brain damage and might have to learn to walk, talk, and read all over again.
Lenard was transferred to a rehab facility downtown.
Things aren't perfect for Leonard Clark, but doctors say he's getting better.
He is going to recover much more than he is now.
That's Dr. Lisa Thornton. During the time that Lenard was all over the news, she became almost a spokesperson, appearing on TV to give updates about his condition.
And the brain doesn't know what to make of what's happening around him, so it comes out as agitation. So he's groaning a lot and moving around in bed a lot. There is a chance of full recovery, certainly, but statistically speaking, most children will have some sort of impairments.
Last summer, we caught up with Dr. Lisa. That's what she likes to be called. She was visiting Chicago from Qatar, where she lives now. What do you remember most about that period in that case?
Well, the media frenzy.
When Dr. Lisa worked with Lenard, she was just a few years out of medical residency, a young black doctor working with some of the hardest cases in the city. She moved here from Michigan.
I think when I got here, one of the most shocking things was that long wall of projects along the Dan Ryan. Wow. I mean, just corralled black people into these huge prisons of problems.
There's a bunch of video and photos of Lenard in the hospital, including one of his mom feeding him with a spoon like a baby.
He recognizes his mother, more her voice than her face. We're very sure that he recognizes her voice because if she's not in the room and he's groaning some, she can just yell out, "Lenard, it's okay," and you'll see him calm down.
At first, the only word Lenard could say was mama.
It's mine. If he recovers, he's not going to be the same child.
Lenard and his mom was getting a lot of love, the kind of attention people from the projects rarely get.
I have some memories of her opening envelopes with checks in them, and because people were so generous from around the country who heard about him.
What was she like?
My assumption is that, Wanda had a hard life herself. It's hard enough to be poor, then to be poor and black. People mistreat you. They dismiss you. They don't have to pay attention to you. That was not an unusual mother to come through our doors.
When Lenard left rehab, he was just starting to walk again.
Doctors here are encouraged by Lenard's progress. He now dresses himself, feeds himself, brushes his own teeth. But they also say he no longer has the reasoning skills of a 13-year-old boy, skills that may never come back.
There were a bunch of news cameras watching his every move.
Now Lenard will begin outpatient therapy 6 hours a day in the hope that he can return to school come fall.
Lenard's mom was walking him out of the hospital. He had on a white Chicago Bulls starter jacket with his hood on to get away from all of the cameras and shit. I was so glad Lenard came out of that coma, but still it felt like, damn, he finna be fucked up for the rest of his life. Lenard and Wanda didn't go back to Stateway Gardens. Instead, the Chicago Housing Authority set aside a single-family home for him with 4 bedrooms and a basketball hoop.
A house with a backyard where he can now play with his new present, a dog named Max.
As if a house outside the hood and a dog named Max wraps this ugly story up. But for Dr. Lisa, that was the end of the story. Did you follow the Lenard Clark case after you worked with him?
No. Generally, we take care of patients till they're an adult. So I thought I would see him as an outpatient. He had an appointment and they didn't come. So I never saw him again. I had always wondered how he did and hoped he was okay.
Hearing Dr. Lisa say this now, it angers me. Was anyone really looking out for Lenard and his mom? Helping them navigate this new reality? More energy was put into reforming the image of a white Bridgeport prince than into healing the body of a black boy. While Lenard and his family worked towards recovery, the alliance between Frank Sr. and the Reverend B. Herbert Martin moved beyond the walls of the church.
75 men fanned out into the high-rises this morning, taking the dark, smelly stairways to residents' doors.
Good morning. Ready to take the kids to school?
Shootings were a common thing near the projects, but around this time there was an unusual spike. So Reverend Martin put together a group of men to walk little kids to school in the mornings.
Let's go! Let's go! All right, let's get the little ones out.
It was guys from the neighborhood. And
Bridgeport's Frank Caruso spent his second morning on the escort patrol. His son, Frank Caruso, is awaiting trial in the beating of black teenager Lenard Clark.
I'm a parent. There's no color in being a parent.
Yep, Frank Sr. was there too. He was even given an award named after a young black boy who was killed in the project.
Last but not least, the Dan Trail Davis Memorial Award to Mr. Frank Caruso Sr.
I'd like to thank everybody. I'm really honored to be here amongst brothers and sisters. Thank you.
The award was presented by a deacon in Reverend Martin's church.
But never in my life have I seen anybody from the Bridgeport community reach out in such a way to begin to build bridges. Certainly, the Lenard Clark affair was a tragedy, and it's heavy on the hearts of both communities. But what we have to do is try to build a bridge.
And this guy said something significant, that Frank Sr.'s cross-racial bridge building isn't the only reason he's being celebrated.
I've got some personal interests. I want to see young black men a part of the union. These gentlemen and other gentlemen have an expertise where we lack an expertise.
He wants to see young black men a part of the union, and Caruso can help. Because back then, Frank and his brother were big in the unions. This was before Laborers International was forced to investigate organized crime in its ranks. A federal court even got involved. After that, Frank and his brother got the boot.
What we're trying to do is build a bridge.
So, we've seen Frankie's parents give intimate interviews with Fox News and speeches in front of large church crowds. We've seen Frank Caruso Sr. walk black kids to school and receive an award for his service to the black community. But then, there's this article.
And there was an article with Frank Caruso Jr., the Reverend Martin's daughter.
This article, man.
Talking about how they were friends and that's, I mean, this shit was bizarre, man.
It was in Chicago Magazine. This big color photo of little Frankie lounging on the floor in his socks, looking real friendly with a black girl, Reverend Martin's daughter, on a yellow beanbag chair. The first line of the article says, Frankie Caruso has a crush on a girl. At first he was shy. Then they started to hit it off. If that picture was a song, I know exactly which one. Boys to Men. I'll make love to you like I. In the article, Martin's daughter said she believes Frankie when he says he didn't beat Leonard. And even if he was involved, he's deeply sorry. She goes on. If he did do it, he didn't know what he was doing. This shit was getting real funky, right? But Frankie's trial was coming up, and things were about to get a lot funkier.
The prosecution's main dilemma is witnesses. One was murdered, the other has disappeared.
You Didn't See Nothing is a production of the Invisible Institute and USG Audio. This podcast was written and reported by me, Yohance Lacour, with Bill Healy, Dana Brozost-Kelleher, Erisa Apantaku, and Sarah Geis. Sound design, mixing, and music supervision by Steven Jackson and Phil Dmochowski at the Audio Non-Visual Company. Original music by Taka Yasuzawa. Executive produced by Alison Flowers and Jamie Kalven for the Invisible Institute and Josh Bloch for USG Audio. Production support by Jennifer Sears. Fact-checking by Angely Mercado. Our key art is by Kenneth L. Copeland Jr. Special thanks to Mindy, Pugh, and the Progressive Community Church Archives at the Illinois Institute of Technology. The archival audio from this episode comes from the President's Weekly Radio Address, CNN, Fox News, Fox Chicago, WMAQ, CBS Chicago, Getty Images, NBC News Archives, CBS, WTTW, Boys to Men, UMG Recording Inc. and Motown Record Company, and NPR. For more information, go to our show notes or visit our website, usgaudio.com.